Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Master, and welcome back to another Overly Sarcastic Productions reaction. That was a mouthful. History summarized, the cities of ancient Sparta.
Yes!
Yeah, obvious joke is obvious, am I right? I mean, what's there to say about ancient Sparta? I mean, I know there's the movie, there's the really old meme at this point. I know they had this weird government with two kings, but then there was also like a council of elders or something. And there was the myth that they threw weak-looking children off of cliffs when they were born. Oh, no! I remember this one thing. I think it was actually in one of... no, it wasn't one of their videos. But the thing was, like, in the future, after, like, the true city-state of Sparta fell, and it was more like a larger, part of Greece... Sparta actually became a tourist trap in its time, and they actually, had people acting like how they thought that the truly classical Spartans, acted. It's actually really funny. Yeah, so other than that, originals linked in the description. Yeah, if I've done my calculations correct, top left corner will be towards my newest episode of Deus Ex Human Revolution. Getting really close to finishing that game. I think at the time of recording, there's only 3 or 4 more episodes left. So getting pretty close. Other than that, let's get this started, shall we?
The walls of ancient Sparta were said to be made not of brick, but of men. And like many things said about the Spartans, this is almost as cool as it is misleading. By the classical period, Sparta had earned a reputation for its brutal training program and singular focus on producing the best warriors possible. So women exercised rigorously to bear the strongest Spartans, and those boys began their training at age 7. The military machismo is palpable. Then, in 480, came their crowning achievement of defending Thermopylae to the death against Persia and ousting them for good the following year, and so the myth of Spartan excellence was set forever. Sparta's actual battle record is less impressive, but the badass fear no death vibe was enough to convince most of mainland Greece to join the winner's circle and ally with Sparta's Peloponnesian League. For a century and a half, Sparta was the dominant polis in Greece, defeating even the Athenian Empire in a 30-year war. But all this power and influence translated into shockingly little. By now, Spartans had long tired of artistry or literature and never cared for outside trade or shiny architecture. Sparta was and would remain 4 humble villages in a valley between the mountains of Laconia whose primary exports were pithy quotes and violence. So maybe they had no use for walls because of their buff hoplites and naturally defensive terrain, but perhaps Sparta's best armor was its glory. Now, if the Spartans spent all their time
Yeah, well, I mean, when you say it like that, that sounds rather sad.
I'm exercising, training, and flexing their muscles for the bros in the barracks, who was doing all of the farming to support their society. Ancient Greek sexism was a hell of a drug, but even Spartan women enjoyed many of the same privileges and leisures as male citizens. Instead, the Spartans handled the task of agriculture with slavery. Like, holy hell, so much slavery. See, just to the west of Laconia is the region of Mycenaea, and sometime in the late 700s, Sparta waged a multi-generational war to conquer Mycenaea and subjugate the entire population as helots, a whole class of people enslaved and owned communally by the Spartan state, laboring in the fields for centuries so the boys back home had more time to run laps and wrestle. From its earliest identifiable history, Spartan society was built to preserve this core dynamic of citizen leisure and helot servitude, and they remained utterly terrified that it might break. Unfortunately, Sparta's enemies were aware of this, so the city of Argos supported a helot uprising in the mid-600s to try and topple Sparta. It failed, but the lingering paranoia might have been the spark for Sparta's subsequent transformation into a military aristocracy, complete with a secret police designed to spy on and terrorize the helots. However frightening it must have been to go up against a classical-era Spartan phalanx, it had nothing on how scared they were about the Mycenaeans they'd enslaved. For all the scholarly debate about Sparta's actual strength in battle, 2 clear weaknesses are how they had no cavalry and they could barely sail to save their lives.
Yeah, the second part, they kind of reminds me of the Romans. Because with the Romans, I believe, didn't they just turn naval combat into land combat? Because I think they had this thing where on their ships they had like basically a giant drawbridge that had giant metal spike on the end of it. They drop it on enemy ships and then have soldiers march onto the other ships to fight them.
But this is where the Peloponnesian League proved useful, as it allied Sparta to the second strongest naval power in Greece, the city of Corinth. Situated right at the isthmus connecting the Peloponnese to the mainland and smack in between two seas, Corinth was a maritime heavyweight in trade, naval power, and colonization, with settlements spanning from Potidea to Korkyra to Syracuse. Throw in how Corinth was an actual city renowned across Greece for its beauty, and it was easily Sparta's crown jewel of the league. If they cared about that kind of thing. Naturally, Sparta really just wanted Corinth for their ships, because that was their only shot at standing up to the fleet of the Athenian Empire. Unfortunately for Sparta, two Corinthian colonies got into trouble with the mother city by allying with Athens, setting off the diplomatic fuse that would draw Sparta and Athens into their giant awful war. Even worse, Corinth's second best navy in Greece couldn't cut it against Athens, as they got clowned on at the Battle of Naupactus in 429. Sparta's only relief came in 407 when they got a massive pot of gold to fund a fleet and finally kick Athens' ass, courtesy of the Persians. A little scandalous, but Sparta was too pragmatic to let cultural sympathy override a good strategy.
Hey, I mean, if you have two enemies and you see them start fighting, support one of them, so then you only have to deal with one enemy. Divide and conquer.
Some Greek cities seems destined to not exist. See, when war finally broke out between Athens and Sparta in 431 BC, the Spartans' plan for a quick and easy win was to besiege the city, burn the countryside, and either starve them out or bait them into a losing battle. But Athens had the naval convoys to keep the city well fed, and the restraints to not run outside their walls and get immediately flattened by a Spartan phalanx, or so they feared. So in 429, Sparta instead set out for nearby Plataea. It was the site of the final battle of the Persian Wars, and after its destruction, the Greeks rebuilt it and made it into a neutral sacred space in thanks for their role in the victory. However, Plataea was always being menaced by its bigger neighbor Thebes, so ever since 519, the Plataeans had a defense agreement with Athens. Now, when the big war got going a century after, Thebes took the occasion to live its truth and attack Plataea, sending in saboteurs and building giant ramps to scale the walls, but failing to breach the city before Sparta arrived in 429. The Plataeans tried to convince Sparta with appeals to their sacrifice and valor in the Persian War, but those rascally Lacedaemonians insisted Plataea had broken its sacred oath by being too cozy with Athens. So Sparta joined the siege, blockaded the city, and starved them out by 427. Easier to do when they didn't have a navy. While most Plataeans had escaped to the safety of Athens, Sparta smashed the city into pebbles, just as viciously as another invader had done some 50 years earlier. Perhaps the biggest obstacle to understanding Sparta is how little they ever explained themselves, so we're left with Athenian and later Roman accounts of the Spartans that exoticize and praise them to Thermopylae and back. But looking through their history, we see a pragmatic cruelty pervading their choices. Kill the Plataeans, they're too friendly with Athens. Ally with archenemy Persia to defeat Athens. Any boat money is good boat money. Enslave an entire population of helots to make them farm. It gives us more time to exercise. Beat your kids and leave them to starve. It'll train them into tougher soldiers. Sparta's cruelty was deliberate and calculated not just against its enemies, but imposed on itself. Spartans loved their leisure, yet also chose to make their lives harsher for the sake of their army and state. What strikes me about Sparta are these contrasts, like how individual Spartans have a blasé attitude towards death, be it in battle or childbirth, yet Sparta as a polis was ruled by fear of change, of foreigners and their ideas, of not being stronger than their enemies, and of the helots they enslaved. Sparta and Athens aren't mirror opposites, and they both cut a villainous figure in the Peloponnesian War, but more than any other civilization in the classical world, people's perceptions and praises of Sparta says a lot more about them and their values than it says about the boys in red. Thank you for watching. My favorite part of researching these Greek history videos is how the research...
I mean, what else is there to say? You have this warrior culture that's more afraid of others and the people that they've enslaved versus the people than, like, death itself. I mean, just how many years of that does that take for that to become just so ingrained in a populace? And what happened in Sparta's past that sent them down this path? As he said, if they didn't write down a lot, it might be one of those things that was just lost to history. Yeah, so as I said, original linked in the description if you haven't seen it already for some reason. Top corner is linked to my newest Deus Ex Human Revolution video. And with that all said, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.